Sean Mancini, and I'm the event coordinator for the spring series. And I'm very proud to present Ling O'Connor, who teaches environmental science here. She's going to be our facilitator for all 4 spring workshops. Look at your bulletins, your portals, and if you don't have any flyers, you can contact me. It's Sean Mancini, Human Resources, and I'll make sure that you get the information so you guys can sign up for all of her workshops this spring. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Ling O'Connor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. And what I really like today is really create a space for us, campus members to have a dialogue about what's in our food. So I'm sure all of you have some ideas what's in your food. Does anybody want to share? What are some of the things they think is in your food? Preservatives. Chemicals. Pesticides. Hormones.
Water.
A lot of water. Already? All right, good. So a lot of you have some sense of what's in your food, right? So when I was preparing for this conversation, so I was like, okay, so there's all kinds of stuff in the food. Where do I even start? So one of the things I did is I went on the FDA and looked at the list of approved additives. Right? So the first thing you want to do is when you want to know what's in your food, you do what? You look at the labels, right? Everybody read labels, right, these days to find out what's in your food. So I said, okay, let me find out how many additives are there. So I went on a website, there are pages and pages and pages of it. I was like, it's obvious, I can't count them. And there's nowhere on the web page I could find out, a total number. So I called them. It took them like a while to respond. So finally, they called me back, actually this Monday. So the answer was, we don't know. He said, you can just count. I said, well, I gave up after 500. I never really tried, actually, because there were so many. He said, well, we really don't know how many there are, but we think, now, listen, this is approved additives, right? It's not like just how many are there. We don't really know. We think there's over 3,000. And then he goes, do you know what that means? Do you know what is a food additive? I said, well, just the definition you have online. He said, well, that doesn't include flavoring compounds. And there are thousands of those. Cool. Then he says it also does not include all those chemicals that they are considered GRAS. GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe. I said, okay, so who decides if something is GRAS? He says, any qualified being. What makes a person qualified? Well, if they're just qualified. All right, so that's okay. All right, so okay, I'm making a loaf of bread. I'm going to put in my label what I have in there. So do I have to show? So if I say this is grass, then I don't even have to put in a food label. So who decides this is, and do I have to prove to the FDA this is indeed grass? He said, no. And then I said, okay, so now I have this label that I'm listing some of these things. Who decides, who verifies that's really what's in there? No one. He goes, well, that's a waste of the FDA's resources to try to figure out what's in them. So bottom line, so these are sort of what I got from the conversation. And then I asked him, I said, hey, can I have your name and phone number so I can call you back? We have more questions. So he gave me his name, and he said, well, you can call this number. Chances are I would not be talking to you because I'm the director of the division. So I didn't get anywhere from there. And then there are just thousands and thousands of chemicals. Like, where do you even begin? Where do you even start? So what I decided to do was this, that I decided to really look at the 2 leading causes of death in the US. And maybe look at, whatever is out there that relates to these 2 leading causes of death. So that's my final approach. So one of the first things I found that relates to these 2 is what's in your food is your tax dollars. And the biggest chunk of the farm subsidies goes to corn. So So you can see, and then how does that relate to heart disease and cancer? So the thing with farm subsidy is that actually most of you probably know the biggest chunk of the farm subsidy goes to the really rich farmers. They don't really help little farmers at all. So what happens is that we overproduce, crops have been subsidized, and the price become very, very low. Because we produce so much corn, the price is so low, we have to find ways to use them. So one of the ways to use them is to make corn syrup. And what's really interesting is that you think you're eating healthy food. If you look carefully, corn syrup's found its way even in what is considered healthy food. Here's only one of the examples. Notice how many times that corn is actually mentioned. And this is actually expensive yogurt, considered healthy. This is actually a label for salad dressing. So if you think you're eating healthy, look carefully at your food salad dressing. Actually, I found a whole bunch of them, salad dressing. I didn't end up taking all those pictures. Show you again and again, it's showing up in food salad dressing. So it's obvious, right? So corn syrup goes up, obesity goes up, so that's really obvious, and most everybody knows that. Next one. And this is from the Center Disease Control, the National Institute of Health statistics. And how does that relate to the two top killers in the US? Well, so the graph speaks for itself. Next one, please. Now that's pretty obvious, straightforward, right? Okay, we've grown all this corn, we find ways to use it, we make corn syrup, it gets into everything we eat, so people's weights are going up, obesity is going up, and that's related to cancer and heart disease. But what is not straightforward and obvious was what's termed the American paradox. What the American paradox is that while the consumption of fat has gone down, obesity has gone up. So you have two graphs, consumption of fat going this way, obesity going this way. So for a while, it's sort of like a mystery, right? Because all of you have heard of the low-fat diet, right? That kind of dominated the US sort of like ideology of nutrition for a really long time. Recently, someone wrote a paper in the Journal of History of Medicine and Related Sciences. The author calls the whole idea low-fat an ideology. the reason she called it ideology is that because it's really based on very, very little science, very, very little evidence. But it conquered US, it ruled the US, and in fact, the government begins to tell people what to eat, and the government begins to promote a low-fat diet. But the paradox is that low-fat diet is actually having sort of like opposite as obesity. And like we saw earlier, obesity is related to heart disease. So the incidence of heart disease in the same period also went up. So whereas people are eating low fat because it's supposed to be better for your heart, but incidence of heart disease is actually going up. And death from disease is also going up. And notice I'm using like government data. I'm not using some environmentalist data. I was trying to be very hard to stick with government sources. Next one, please. So it turned out that when you take in fat, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a biochemist. I've tried to read the original material and it's really, really complicated and I just end up falling asleep. But there's some like simplified maps like this. So when you take in fat, you can see that it can go two different directions. Right? Our body needs fat. And two of the essential fats our body cannot make are omega-6 and omega-3. So when you take these fats in, so we have, like there's really important functions, right? So you can see that it can go one way or the other way. Both ways, both are really important. So what researchers have found that it's not so much the total fat you take in, but the ratio of the kind of fat you take in. Yes?
Is it a lipid of fat?
Yeah, yeah. So it seems like if you take omega-3 encourages to go this way, and omega-6 encourages to go this way. So unfortunately for me, because I am not a biochemist, there's another researcher. He's actually a medical doctor. He's also a neuroscientist, and he suffered from a brain tumor himself. So he just wrote this book called Anti-Cancer, A New Way of Life. I really recommend you to check it out if you haven't seen it. So in his book, he puts it in everyday language for us. So ultimately, omega-3 promotes inflammation that's related to all kinds of diseases and stimulates fat cell production. So if you eat more omega-6, you're likely to gain weight. And so it makes cells more rigid, so promote diseases once again. So on the other side, omega-3, that's the opposite. So what people found out is not so much the total intake of fat, but the kind of fat that you take in. So how does that relate to back what we're talking about? So you would go back to this chart. So because of low-fat ideology ruled America, so fat consumption went down. But we can't just not have fat. So instead, we're taking in vegetable oils. What is it saying to you so far? And what does that mean to you?
It doesn't seem to me what kind of, the kind of fat makes a difference, but the total fat intake has increased over time for America.
Good job. So even though we're eating low fat, we're not really taking in less fat. We're actually taking in more fat. We're taking in more fat because what? What?
We're eating more fatty food.
We're eating more fatty food, thank you. And one of the reasons that we're eating more fatty food is because we want to go low fat, and fat is flavor. We like fat, right? This is how we are wired, you know. Fat is important for us. You can see all that function that we need the fat, and fat stores up for rainy days, right? So it's really important. We like fat. So when we go to low fat food doesn't taste so good for us anymore. So we put in more sugar, and we put in other kinds of fat, right? So what else do you get out of this?
Well, I think it's like that you don't